Fine, thank you, Mark.
I was about to take control, Senator Warner. Welcome, Chair Powell, and Gus sends his regards. If you have time after the hearing, you ought to go by and see him. He's a dog in our office. But
I don't want to disturb his nap, but
but thank you for being here. I want to get back on this Basel III proposal. Senators Lummis, Coons, Gillibrand, and I sent a letter indicating our concerns with the current proposal. But I think it's also worth noting that the number of other organizations, a diverse group that are not normally aligned on policy. You got Bank Trades, National Housing Conference, NAACP, Habitat for Humanity, National Community Reinvestment Coalition, the list goes on, who have concerns with the current proposal. Here's my concern. I think we're trying to make the best of what was foundationally a bad proposal. And so I'm in the category of people who think that it should be reproposed because I think one of the reasons why I did not support Mr. Barr's nomination is I felt like we were going to be here. I mean, it was pretty clear to me before he ever got confirmed on the board that we were going to be in this place some months or years later. And here we are. And I think that the industry felt the same way. All of these stakeholders, some of them are in banking trade, some of them are on the other side of the spectrum. So I'd like to cast my vote or provide some weight to the idea that we should repropose it. And what we ought to do is talk about the reality of increasing capital, or the prospect of increasing capital requirements doesn't concern me. I think the prior Fed supervisor had made comments publicly that maybe we needed to raise capital standards. But what we did hear in this proposal, and I heard in that dialogue, is let's deal with puts and takes. Let's talk about raising capital requirements, but let's also talk about reducing the cost of the regulatory burden today if we can do it responsibly. There's no evidence of that in the current proposal, and I think that may actually produce a different set of comments that would be instructive to a final proposal that I think realistically will include some increasing capital requirements. So over what time horizon do you think we would expect to either try to make the best of this foundation or go back and take a look at a new foundation and repropose it?
you know, we're going to work through it as quickly as we can and should. I will say it's more important to get it right than it is to do it fast. We're not in a hurry. But my guess is we'll work this out over the course of this year.
Yeah. Well, if you take a look at the outsized cost of operational risk, the long list of concerns that I have publicly and privately expressed on the current proposal, I do think sometimes it's easier to knock down what I think is a poor foundation and build a better house. So again, just wanted to make that comment publicly. I got a question about shrinkflation. I tell you, some of these words that we come up with, but President Biden's using the idea of shrinkflation and chastising manufacturers for creating smaller portion sizes for potato chips. I'll use that as one example. But if you have rising input cost, and you're not able to control that, and you're in a marginal business to begin with, and now you're saying you can't even reduce the quantities. How does a business that's not making a profit make that work?
I mean, we see inflation at the aggregate level as a mismatch between supply and demand. Yeah. And as we've seen supply get better and we've seen demand cool off a bit, it was very hot coming out of the pandemic. We see inflation coming down.
We saw food inflation between 2010 and 2021 at 18% over 11 years. And over the last 3 years, we've seen it at 21%. I think that we have a industry that's trying to actually provide products that consumers want, and now they're being chastised for trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. So this whole idea of shrinkflation is just confounding to me. I'm going to submit some for the record. I want to stay on time. But I have a question. I think the chair mentioned, if I misunderstood this, I'm sure the chair will clarify, but I thought in his opening comments, he suggested that stock buybacks and paying out dividends were a key factor in inflation. Do you, as just a matter of policy, see stock buybacks and dividends as one of the top 5 reasons we're experiencing the inflation we have right now?
First, I guess I see stock buybacks and dividends as just the same thing in a different form. And I don't know, I wouldn't comment on anything the chair even may have said.
Well,
I'd like to avoid that.
I don't think, I'm not going to ask you about policy because I think you're consistent on that, but I just can't imagine that if we decided to outlaw stock buybacks and dividend payments, that would have a material effect on inflation. So I'm not going to ask you to respond to that, but there are some people that by inference you could assume that they think that would be helpful. I just, for one, I'm not an economist, but I just can't imagine that it would be, one of the things that would make your job easier. Can you at least opine on that?
Banning stock buybacks and dividends?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be quite a change in our capital markets.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, shareholders, this is just money going back to shareholders from companies that have nothing to do with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well done, Senator Tillis. Senator Smith of Minnesota.